Hello folks, and welcome to the SO Hacker Log. I am your script kiddie in security land, and this is my network that is being monitored by Security Onion. If you want a detailed explanation of how to configure Security Onion and deploy it into a small network, then see the link down in the description. In this episode, we are going to use ChatGPT to help us write a custom Suricata rule to alert the nefarious DNS traffic that I showed you in the last episode. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. Once again, in the lower left-hand corner here, we have a Kali Linux virtual machine that is running on top of an Ubuntu host. And this Kali Linux is acting as a DNS server for a reverse shell through DNS. And in the background here, I have a Windows host running with the Security Onion console open in a web browser. And as you can see, we are looking at this same anomalous DNS traffic that we were looking at in the last video. So over here in the Alerts tab of the Security Onion console, I have the update frequency here set to 1 minute as usual. And as you can see, Security Onion is still not alerting us to this traffic. And there is no way that this traffic is not nefarious in this example. So what we need is a rule that is going to alert us to this traffic. I'm going to go over here to the left to the detections menu item in the menu on the left-hand side of the console here, and I am going to go ahead and right-click on that and open it in a new tab. And Suricata is what's sniffing the network traffic in Security Onion, so what we need is a Suricata rule that is going to alert this traffic. I am going to click on Suricata here, and I am going to include it in our search results so that we are filtering our rules for Suricata rules. Then I am going to scroll down the page here, and I am going to click on the little binoculars icon next to one of these Suricata rules. As you can see, I have a test rule here that I was using when I was troubleshooting a little earlier, but what I'm going to do is actually select the rule below it because I want to show you this entire process of making a new rule. When I click on this binoculars icon, it opens up the information page for that specific rule. And this is where we can edit the rule. So what I'm going to do is go over to the detection source tab here. This shows us the rule in its entirety, and we can edit it here as well. And this one is a pretty complicated rule. Now, they do not need to be this complicated by quite a bit. And just to show you an example, my test rule here that I wrote is really very, very simple in comparison. Okay, but back to the rule that we're working on here. The first thing that we want to do here is we want to duplicate this rule. And that will create a new public ID for us, which is important. These rules will not work in Security Onion without a public ID here. It also toggles the enabled status to off. So now we have a new rule that we are working with here. I'm going to select this entire rule here in the text field, and I'm just going to delete it so that we have a blank slate. And then I am going to go to ChatGPT that I have open here in another tab in this web browser. Now, at the prompt, I'm going to give it some information about my network and the rule that I need. So it's a good idea to tell it that you're running Security Onion because Security Onion requires a pretty specific syntax, and you definitely need to tell it what your subnet is, and you also need to tell it that the only DNS traffic should be to the router. So let's see what it gives us when I ask it this question. And this response that it gives us is actually pretty good. Now, it writes a rule for us, and it gives us an explanation of the rule. I'm going to go ahead and let you read the explanation yourself. If we scroll down here, it also gives us some other information here, like some commands that we need to give to Security Onion after we give Security Onion this rule. It also gives us a second rule to detect DNS responses in the opposite direction. I'm not going to bother with that rule in this example, but it is interesting that it let us know that we can do that as well. Now, as anyone who is worth their salt should know, ChatGPT does make some mistakes sometimes, and it has actually made a mistake here. But I am going to go through this process anyway, just so that I can show you some basic troubleshooting, and for the most part, this is all correct. Okay, so I am going to copy this rule here, and then I'm going to go back to the detections tab here in Security Onion where we are working on this rule, and I'm going to paste it into the text field here. And as you can see, this is really a much simpler rule than the one that we are replacing with it. Now, the SID here needs to be the same as the public ID over here for this to work in Security Onion. And if I try to update this rule right now, Security Onion will actually give me an error that tells me that. So I'm going to go ahead and replace this SID with the public ID here. And then I'm going to hit update on this rule. And Security Onion gave me an error. And it tells me that the rule has to fit on one line, which I'm pretty sure this rule is on one line. So that is a little confusing. So it turns out that the cursor here in this text field is actually on a different line than the rule. So let's see what happens when I just hit a backspace so that the cursor is on the same line as the rule. And that is indeed the problem. Okay, so now the rule has updated, and I'm going to go ahead and toggle the status to enabled. So as ChatGPT told us, we now need to issue some commands to the server. So what I'm going to do is SSH into the server so that I can do that. Down here in the taskbar of Windows 11, I am going to just type in CMD so that I can get a command prompt here. And I am going to SSH into my Security Onion server. Now, as you recall, ChatGPT told us to run sudo so rule update and then run sudo so suricata restart. I am actually going to do something in between those two steps just to make sure that the rule was actually updated. So for right now, what I'm going to do is issue the first command, sudo so rule update. And Security Onion will take a little bit of time running a rules update for us. Okay, so now that that has actually completed, I'm going to go ahead and actually check to make sure that that rule got updated, because Security Onion often operates on a scale of minutes rather than on a scale of seconds. And it is really doing an awful lot of stuff, but I also think that it is just the way that it is architected, that updates often happen in a matter of minutes rather than a matter of seconds. So I'm just going to use vi to look at the local rules file here just to make sure that that rule was added. And it isn't there. So the second step to run so suricata restart won't actually do anything for us. So we need this rule to actually update. And in fact, in this case, it might just be a matter of waiting a minute or two and then running the command again. Okay, so now I have just waited a couple of minutes, and I'm going to just run the so rules update command again just to see if this rule updates now. And now I am going to check again to make sure that the rule is in the local rules file here. And there it is. So we just needed to wait a few minutes for everything in Security Onion to sync up. And that is normal for Security Onion. Think of it as slow and methodical rather than inconvenient for the end user. Okay, so now that this rule has updated, we can move to the next command that ChatGPT told us to execute, which is sudo so suricata restart. And once I issue that command, Suricata will spend a little bit of time restarting. And it hasn't given us any errors here, so now, hypothetically, this Security Onion server should start alerting us to the DNS tunnel that I have currently running. And as you can see, this DNS tunnel is definitely still active. So going back to the alerts page here, there is a new alert here, but it is not our DNS tunnel, and it is telling me that I am using a vulnerable open SSH version. And I do need to update this server. So hopefully when I do update this server, that will solve that problem right there. But that is not the DNS tunnel that we are looking for. So back in the alerts tab here again, you can see that this is still not alerting. So something doesn't seem to be happening correctly. If you go back to the test rule that I had here that was working, and this is a really simple rule that should fire on all traffic coming through the network, no matter what it is. So if you want to make sure that your Suricata is working, something like this is a good test. Now, this test rule that I wrote worked perfectly when I was testing it. And as you can see, there is only one IP address listed as the source and one IP address listed as the destination. And ChatGPT put 2 IP addresses in the source and destination of our rule. So what I'm going to do is delete the extra IP address in both cases here and see if that solves this problem. Okay, so updating that caused no errors, so that's a good sign. Now I am going to go back to the SSH tunnel that I have open to Security Onion, and I am going to issue the rules update command again here. Once again, a couple of minutes later, I am going to open up the local rules file just to make sure that that update occurred, and as you can see, it did. Now I am going to restart Suricata one more time, and hopefully this DNS tunnel will start being alerted for us. Okay, so everything basically looks good there. So let us go back to the alerts page here in the Security Onion console and see if it starts alerting us to this traffic now. And a minute or so later, the page updates, and as you can see, here it is. It is now alerting us to this traffic, and as you can see, there are 42 alerts here already, and this is an active connection, so it should be giving us a lot of alerts about this traffic. So that's good. Now we are being alerted about this DNS tunnel. Now here I have the severity listed as low, and I would actually change that to high, but I'm not going to bother doing that right now. Another minute passes and this page updates again, and we have a lot more alerts here for this DNS traffic, so that's good. Now we are being alerted to this traffic. So I am just going to go back to ChatGPT now and tell it that it gave us incorrect syntax here. And when I do that, it gives us some corrected rules here. So the last thing that I want to do is just point out that you can do some thresholding here so that a certain level of traffic has to be reached before we get an alert for this traffic. Now it has written some updated rules for us with thresholding in it, and it has again given us not quite correct syntax for Security Onion, so this is another mistake that it made. This all needs to be on a single line if you are dealing with Security Onion. Also, you could just ask it to do the syntax correctly and it will do that for you. Now, I am not going to bother with any of that right now. I just wanted to clue you into the concept of thresholding here. If you want certain thresholds to be reached in your network traffic before you get alerted to something. So there you have it. Now we have a custom rule running in Suricata that is alerting us to a nefarious DNS tunnel. So that is good.